Hi guys, my name's Steve. I run Vorsprung Suspension up here in Whistler, and welcome to the Tuesday Tune. This is going to be our last video for this season about all things suspension tech. So for this episode, we have Remy Metaya here. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Yes. Alright, good. Remy Metallica, for those who can't speak French. And we're going to talk about the way that we set up Remy's suspension and the way that a lot of other people will set up their suspension as well. And what it really boils down to, in the simplest terms, is working out your priorities. So we've worked with Remy for several years now, and he's very easy to work with in a lot of ways because he knows exactly what he wants, and so he can tell us, you know, I want to not be bottoming out the front end in this situation, I want it to be able to be bottomed out in this situation, and I want this, that, and the other. And it sounds demanding, but it's actually the opposite because it's very specific. So, Remy, tell us a little bit about your demands for the front and the rear, particularly with bottoming out, as I just mentioned.
So, I don't know if it's like super special or not. I'm okay with bottoming out the back, like the rear end of the bike, either if I do something really extreme or if I make a mistake. But in any situation, like I really dislike to bottom out the fork. So I like to keep the fork like stiff enough and progressive enough so I don't ever bottom out except I really make a bad mistake or really land into like nosedive into a compression or something like really extreme. But on a normal day, I'm okay with bottoming out the back on like something really big or like a little mistake, but I really like to keep the front end not bottoming out. So that's my main requirements in terms of end of the suspension, end of stroke of the suspension.
So what Remy really illustrates here is, you know, his specific requirements for his riding style. Anyone that's seen his videos, you know he sends it huge. And the consequence of something going wrong or the bike being unstable when you land something massive or if you're at rampage, obviously is very large. That may vary from what the average rider wants and needs. You know, personally, I don't ride anything like the same level Remy does. I don't want the same degree of progression from my fork because you're basically okay with not having all of your travel used all the time, correct?
Yeah, like on the front at least, just because the main reason is if I'm going to bottom out, if I land something like really hard landing, I want to keep the front end always a tiny bit higher than the rear end, so I'm okay, like I want actually the bike to walk a bit that way. So that way I can keep my hands high enough from the ground and I feel I can take the impact more with my legs and less with my arms.
So Remy has a new suspension sponsor for the season, which is DVO, if you can't tell from the, the green and black. So our process for setting up Remy's bike is usually, first things first, getting something that is vaguely appropriate. So a spring rate that looks like it's in the ballpark, front and rear, send him out and ride it, see what the feedback is. Because with Remy, usually the feedback is, I need more progression. So last year we basically spent most of the season installing volume spacers into Remy's fork and shock. What that also means is that we don't try to presume a certain setup will work best. Rather than saying that something is the correct setup, what we look for is the deficiencies in the setup that become apparent once it's ridden. And obviously, going back to the priorities point, this varies from rider to rider. So Remy is often doing very short stints for filming and whatnot and riding in the bike park, not necessarily trying to do 20-minute enduro, you know, race laps basically. And so the requirements will obviously vary there. Tell us about your average day in the bike park and what you require from your suspension there.
Like I try to have the best setup on the bike, mainly for like if I do a video or if I have to hit a gap, especially if it's like a new gap or a new line, I want to make sure that I have the best setup just for that. And so I usually ride the bike stiffer and so more stable at high speed, and that's gonna be safer on a big impact, on a big compression. because that's what's gonna help me to make sure I can clear a gap or be safe on the line. So that way, like, I feel really comfortable in that kind of situation. The other hand is that if I try to ride the bike for like 4 minutes, it's gonna feel like really demanding because the bike is set up to go as fast as I can for like 30 seconds or 45 seconds and not for 4 minutes. But then if I do a normal day in the bike park and I just do laps or I try to do a race, I'm actually usually riding a softer bike than what I would ride, like less compression, tiny bit less air on the fork, either like less air on the air shock if it's an air shock, or a spring rate a tiny bit lower if I actually ride like a more normal kind of riding, like such as a race or just like doing laps with friends.
Tell us how you feel about sag percentages.
I have no idea how much sag I have on the bike, and that's not something I pay attention to, just because, especially when it's a new bike, because every bike is so different. I don't ever look at the sag on the front. I don't think it's something accurate that helps to set up the bike. And on the back, people will tell you that you need usually 20 to 30% sag on a downhill bike, but I think it depends so much on the curve of the suspension, how progressive is the suspension. So I don't.
How hard are you riding compared to that level?
Yeah, exactly. Because if you take like the really fast guys, that's like a really fast guy that's like 70 kilo, and like a beginner that's 70 kilo, if they use the same sag, that will mean that the really fast guy has to have, in order to not bottom out at every single impact, has to have like super progressive suspension, so a lot of volume spacer or like different internals and stuff like that. So I don't ever pay attention to the sag. I just try to find the spring rate that gives me the support I need, the comfort I need, and that's gonna kind of set up the bottom out, like the limit where I bottom out, where I want it to be. So yeah, I don't ever look at the sag of the bike.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree that sag is on its own not all that important. There is no magic number, there is no correct spring rate as such. There is what's appropriate for you, and that usually has to be determined by some degree of trial and error.
When you get a brand new bike and just even before riding it, like you can have a vague idea of if it's gonna be close or not. So I guess it's always like a good tool, but
I think it's worth highlighting where you said most bikes are designed or stated to be run with between 20 and 30% sag. The difference between 20% and 30% sag is not 10%.
It's huge.
It's 50%, because to increase the spring rate on a linear leverage bike to go from 30% to 20%, you literally need to increase it by 50%. That's the difference between a 400 pound inch spring and a 600 pound inch spring. Obviously, both of those can't work for you. One of them might, but both of them won't. And so the range of sag measurements that's usually specified by frame or fork or shock manufacturers is very broad, and it's broader than it sounds as well, because that 10% difference, or even 5% difference between 25% and 30% is actually quite substantial. Trying to hit one of those numbers just for the sake of hitting the number is not necessarily the right way to go about it. It isn't necessarily the most appropriate thing for you. And that's why when we work with guys like Remy, I've never even measured his sag. I have no idea what he was.
I have absolutely no idea how much sag I have.
Yeah.
And it depends a lot on how progressive is the bike, and then if I'm playing with an air shock or a spring, depending how much volume spacer I put on an air shock, like I'm gonna have a bike that's like more of a progressive, and this impacts so much like what sag I should be running.
Let's talk about the difference in requirements and the compromises between support and comfort. So tell us where you would want a more comfortable ride rather than something that is necessarily more supportive or safer.
So I think that's interesting. If you ride something that's just like bumpy but doesn't have like much big impact, like a terrain where it's like really loose, it's hard to find the grip, but there's not really any big impact, I'm gonna ride a bike that's usually a bit softer, just to get that comfort and like that traction on the ground. But most of the time, and so it's maybe more comfortable on my hands. But if I ride like a trail that's still steep and I still want traction, but if there's big impact, I think support is going to be one of the main things. And especially on the body, I feel a terrain like a track with this big compression, like heavy holes, big roots, big rocks. If my bike is actually not very stiff but very supportive, that has a lot of support, and you can play that with the air, but mainly with like air or spring rate, but mainly with the compression and with the damping. I actually feel that I don't have to hold my bars as much because the bike is more predictable. The fork and the rear end is not going to dive as much on the hull. So if the bike is more supportive, I can actually ride a bit more relaxed. But obviously you lose on the very top part of the travel. It's hard to always keep like a lot of sensitivity.
To give you some context for that, and the way that Remy in particular perceives that compromise, how often do you work out? You put this on Tinder.
Every day?
Every day, right. So we have a professional athlete who's working out every day in the bike park. How many days did you do last year in the Whistler bike park?
So that's probably 100 days.
100 days in the Whistler bike park, plus traveling elsewhere and riding. So this is the setup of someone who rides extremely hard, is extremely fit, rides a lot. So we are definitely at one end of the spectrum here. As I mentioned before, people who are looking for something that is more comfortable to ride aren't necessarily prioritizing speed and safety to the same degree. And when I say safety, I mean safety in terms of if I crash here, I might die because I'm jumping off a cliff somewhere in Utah. Those people are going to need something a bit different. If you're racing enduro, you're on a 15-minute race run or a 20-minute race run, obviously you can't ride a full body sprint for that period of time. It doesn't matter how fit you are, your body will take a beating, there needs to be some compliance, you need some sort of forgiveness from the bike. And then obviously that would mean that in a short 20-second sprint of very rough, demanding trail, your bike would be slightly slower there, but that's the compromise. Alright guys, that's about all we have time for this week, or this season actually. The workshop here has gotten a bit mental, so we are slowly running out of time to make these videos, unfortunately. We may make some more throughout the season, just sporadically, and we may make more of these next year. But until then, this will be the end of the Tuesday Tune. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.